Welcome to the Training for Translators podcast.
Do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job with our weekly episodes for ambitious freelance translators and interpreters.
Visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com to subscribe to our newsletter, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast.
Now here's your host, Corinne McKay.
Greetings, Training for Translators listeners. This is Corinne McKay with episode 12 of the Training for Translators podcast, in which I'm going to talk about 2024, the year in review, how the year went in my business. And I've been doing these yearly wrap-up posts since approximately 2021, at least since 2021. So if you'd like to read any of the previous year's posts, just go to my blog, trainingfortranslators.com, click the blog link, and in the search box, if you put in the year, you'll find the post for that year. And for 2024, I published this post on January 14th, 2025. I usually do a little bit of a delay between the blog post and the podcast, and sometimes I go back several years, honestly, into my blog archive and just do a podcast about a post that I think would be interesting. But this year I thought no one's really going to care about 2024 by July of 2025. So let's do it now. Every year, when I take a look at how the year went, I try to look at three things. How much money did I make compared to the income goal that I set? How much did I enjoy the work that I'm doing? And how happy am I with life in general? Because I think those things can really sort of play off each other and they're not always aligned. For example, I think it is not uncommon at all to talk to freelancers who say, I'm really happy with how much money I made, but I worked way too hard for that money. Or, I met my income goal, but really it almost killed me because I had to work so much. So I think all of those factors, how much did you earn? How much did you enjoy what you did for work? And how is life going in general are all really important. So rating myself on those factors, and maybe you can do the same for you. For 2024 income, I would say 8 out of 10. I made $125,000 US. And when I say made, I mean everything other than money that I paid out directly to subcontractors. And for what it's worth, I guess I could talk a little bit about my business expenses, which I did not do in the blog post. I should have, but I only thought of it afterward. So my business expenses are probably a bit higher than the average freelancer. First of all, because I rent an office outside my house, which costs me about $6,000 a year, $500 a month. And then I have a lot of software subscriptions, partially to run training for translators. So I have the software subscriptions that we all have, like Microsoft Office and things like that. But then I also have, obviously, a Zoom Pro subscription. I have a subscription to a service called Happy Scribe to put captions on my videos. All of that also adds up to now like another $500 a month. And part of that is because I have a couple of pieces of software that my accountant requires. I spend about $2,000 a year on accounting services, and my accountant requires, because I have a corporation, they require QuickBooks Online, and they require me to use a payroll service called Gusto. So I would say altogether that my business expenses are probably at least $15,000 and maybe more, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But believe me, I'm a pretty frugal person, and I have reviewed all of that, and I don't really see a whole lot of ways I could cut other than working from home, which I don't want to do. We live in a really small house, and there isn't a separate room in which to put my office, which now that I do a lot of interpreting really would not work, especially because when I work on East Coast time and I live in Mountain Time, when I work on East Coast time, we have to log on for the sound check at like 6:30 a.m. my time when no one else in my house is awake by choice, except maybe the foster cats. My husband has a fully remote salaried job. And so I just feel like with the size of our house, it just doesn't work. And I hate working from home. The point being there that I do want to say, because people ask me this with some regularity, I do not have staff. When I talk about how much I made minus subcontracting, I have an accountant and I have a webmaster and I have a couple of online course instructors who teach classes for training for translators, but I do not have staff. I don't have an assistant, nobody like that. I made $125,000 US, which was actually down $10,000 from $135K in 2023. But I am okay with it because I still met my goal and I had some disruptions in the year, which I'll tell you about later. Now, I am not unhappy with that amount. Obviously, at $125,000 US, I am not wondering, like, where is my next meal coming from? But it frustrates me to look back as far as my 2021 wrap-up post, where I set a medium-term goal of $140,000 to $150,000, because I feel that that is the freelance equivalent of a six-figure salaried job, and to realize that now, 4 years later, I'm still not there. So we'll say 8 out of 10 for income. Enjoyment of work, honestly, I would give this year a 10 out of 10. I'm really happy with the mix of translation, interpreting, and teaching and writing. My interpreting work has really exceeded all of the goals that I set when I finished the Glendon College Master of Conference Interpreting program. And after 22 years as a freelancer, I'm really at a point where if work doesn't seem interesting, meaningful, lucrative, or all three, I turn it down. As well, I'll talk about later in this episode, my work has really not been affected by AI at all, at least so far, for which I'm very grateful. And life in general is good. I achieved all of the personal goals that I set out for 2024, other than one that I voluntarily dropped. And I even started doing some new things like working with a business coach, which I'll talk more about later. And I'm also allowing myself to let go of a few things that no longer serve me, which I think for me is kind of a victory because I hate being a quitter. Like, I'm a doer in the extreme. And so quitting something is not easy. And I have a couple of things that I'm going to quit. How did I make that money? So this year I worked for 19 clients, if we include just agencies and direct clients, not individuals. I should start tracking how many words or pages I translated. I didn't do that this year, but I can tell you that I interpreted for 189 days. And when I say day, I mean conference interpreting definition of day, meaning assignments. Day, in remote court could be like 18 minutes, but I did 189 interpreting assignments. That was 93 court and 96 conference. And that was pretty much an exact repeat of 2023 when I worked for 22 clients and interpreted for 193 days. But I did slightly more conference interpreting work this year. One thing I'm quite happy about is that my translation work came from fewer and larger clients. So as I've talked about before, in 2021, I lost a huge translation client. Through no fault of my own, it was an NGO that had come to the end of a large contract, and they were moving on to projects that only required Spanish. But after I lost them in 2022 and 2023, I made enough money from translation, but it was very piecemeal. I had no anchor clients, if you're familiar with that term, which for me would be a client that forms more than 10% of my income or more than $10,000 is sort of where I think of a client as big, for lack of a more nuanced way to put it. So this year was a really good change. I landed a couple of law firm clients and a couple of NGOs as direct clients, so that I'm really happy about. As I said, I made exactly $125,000 when I subtract subcontracting. That was $2,000 from book royalties, $72,000 from direct language work, and $51,000 from teaching and consulting. For a few reasons, I'm just going to give one number for direct language work, but I'm of that $72,000, it's roughly 2/3 interpreting, 1/3 translation, and I'm good with that mix. Now, a few income data points. I track my income based on how much money I I deposited into the bank that much, not how much I invoiced for. I know you can kind of do either, and I find it, because I use QuickBooks, a lot easier to track my collections rather than my billings. So my highest earning month was November. That was more than $16,000. And my lowest earning month was October, which was only $5,000. Now, that is not surprising because interpreting work drops off pretty precipitously in July and August, nor do I typically run training for translators classes in July or August. So there goes like essentially 2/3 of my income in the summer, for which I would then be paid in September, October. And then the summer was extra disrupted because my husband was in a serious mountain bike accident in June. He's now doing way better, pretty much mended. So that was a pretty dramatic curveball in our summer, but I would like to even that flow out a little bit. The other income point that I track is, of the 12 months in 2024, I made more than $10,000 in 8 out of the 12 months. Again, I'm happy with that number, but I'd like to be a little more consistent. And this year, for example, I'd really like to be down to one sub $10,000 month rather than 4. Next, I'm going to talk about a few things that I'm letting go of. But first, let's pause for a brief message from Training for Translators. If you've been following Training for Translators for any length of time, you've probably heard me talk about the world's most boring and most effective marketing technique, nudging dormant clients. It is so much easier to revive an existing connection than it is to create a new connection. But it's sometimes hard to understand why nudging is so effective and how to make it work for you. To help you get after it, I created the Nudge Kit, a simple set of tools that you can start using right away for your own nudging efforts. To get the Nudge Kit for free, join the Training for Translators mailing list in the sidebar of my blog at trainingfortranslators.com. The download link will be in your subscription confirmation email. Welcome back to the second half of episode 12, and I'm going to continue with the topic, letting go of what no longer serves you, which will be familiar to anyone who does yoga. Yoga teachers say that all the time. Let go of something that no longer serves you. But just because it's a bit of a yoga cliche, it doesn't mean it's not true. And for me, it was this year. So for context, I've talked about a couple of other podcast episodes that in the Gretchen Rubin 4 Tendencies framework, which is helps you discover your own productivity tendencies, why you do or don't do the things that you do or don't do. I am an upholder, which means if you tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. And if I tell myself that I'm going to do something, I'm also going to do it. Now, that sounds like a big advantage in life, and in many ways it is. But one of the things that is really tough for me is letting go of unfinished things, even when I don't want to do them or they no longer serve me. Yet, sometimes even I have to admit that I need to be like Princess Elsa from Frozen and just let it go. This year, that applies to 2 things. Number 1, Reedsy, and that's Reedsy. Reedsy is an online platform for book publishing services. And a couple of years ago, they added in book translation services. Now, I was really excited about joining, and it was also a quite extensive application process. To even be considered, you have to have 5 published book translations. So I was just, under the wire or over the wire, however you want to put it. Then you have to do a live training session. Then they go over your profile in great detail. And for me, suggested a bunch of changes before it could go live. In 1 year on Reedsy, I got only 2 inquiries, both of whom decided to go with someone less expensive. So I had been hoping that Reedsy would be attracting sort of a higher end, maybe self-published author contingent, or publishers, small publishers who don't know where to find a translator. And at least for me, that proved not to be true. So I decided to deactivate my profile. Then AIIC, that's AIIC, the International Association of Conference Interpreters. I have been an AIIC pre-candidate for 3 years, which is the maximum. And if you are a conference interpreter or just curious and you'd like to know more about the AIIC system of becoming a member, you can look at their website. I'll put that link in the show notes. So to become an AIIC full member, you have to have 2 things: enough what they call booth days, so enough conference interpreting days, and then you have to have sponsors. And you have to have sponsors to become a pre-candidate as well, but those sponsors can pretty much be anyone in AIIC, whereas to become a full member, the requirements are, as they should be, a lot more rigorous. I won't go into the details, but it has to be people in your language combination, sometimes in your language, with your same A language, your same native language, and they, more crucially for me, they cannot be new members of AIIC. I can't remember exactly how many years, so I don't want to guess at a number, but they can't be new AIIC members. I think that AIIC is a fantastic organization overall, but becoming a full member is all about the network, and it just is a very different network than the network that I have. I don't live in a major city, and the vast majority of my conference interpreting work is remote. So I really just don't come into contact with many AIIC members aside from other new-ish interpreters. I have worked with a few AIIC colleagues, but they are all people who had not been AIIC members long enough to sponsor me. I also have dual citizenship in Switzerland, and at the outset, I thought that maybe I would use that to find work in Europe for part of the year, maybe go to Europe at my own expense. But that proves difficult with AIIC's domicile policies. And again, I'm not criticizing AIIC's domicile policies. I'm just saying, this is something that for me just did not work. That at the outset of AIIC membership, I thought maybe I'll go to Europe twice a year for 2 months at my own expense and try to find some work there. And again, I won't get into the weeds of the AIIC domicile policies, but you can't do that. I think perhaps more crucially, AIIC has a lot of really great looking in-person events that I could have attended, but I just didn't. No excuses there. I just didn't do it. Letting this go is not anything negative about AIIC. It just is something that is not going to work out for me, at least right now. Moving on to trends I see in the language professions. I feel like 2024 was the year that things really changed, especially in the translation world. ChatGPT came on the scene in late 2022. I believe the beta version was released in November 2022. And by early 2024, it felt to me like most translation agencies had really made that leap to machine translation with a human editor whenever the files are readable by a computer. I think for people who mostly or exclusively translate and mostly or exclusively for agencies, so they don't interpret, subtitle, things like that. I just don't see that much what you might call pure translation work anymore unless the files are not readable by a computer or you work with direct clients. How does this shake out in the real world? Well, a few ways. In my experience, translators, and again here, I'm not talking about interpreters, totally different topic, who either just because they were interested or because they kind of saw the writing on the wall, either they diversified or they started working with direct clients a number of years ago, seem to be doing largely well or even very well. So when I say diversified, I mean people who do copywriting, multilingual SEO, subtitling, high-end editing for $100+ an hour, not $25 an hour. I would say that in my own work, I see pretty much zero effect from AI. And when I went to the American Translators Association conference, a pretty similar thing, that translators who were either well established in the direct client market or have sort sort of, translation adjacent services that they provide seem pretty much fine. Now, on the flip side, I think those translators who worked primarily or exclusively for agencies seem to really be struggling. At this year's American Translators Association conference, I talked to a bunch of translators in the direct client market who literally said work has never been better. I'm having to hire subcontractors to work with me because I have so much work. And I talked to a number of translators who just could not find a way to break out of the agency market, who said, again, literally, I'm barely holding on, or who had even taken totally unrelated jobs. And I'm talking about things like working in a restaurant or pet sitting to make ends meet. My direct clients rarely/never mention machine translation or AI other than out of curiosity. Like they might ask, do you use any AI tools? Or they want to verify that I don't use it. This could be due to their own mindset about AI, or it may just be indicative of the direct client market in general, that the client doesn't really care that much how you do the translation as long as it's done well. But I do think that we are seeing, and we will continue to see, a fairly radical reshuffling of the translation profession, and to be honest, a lot of people looking for other careers. Next category, working with a business coach. I want to write a whole newsletter about this, which maybe I'll turn into a podcast episode. But this year I decided it was time to sort of broaden my perspective on my business and get some new input and try new things. I've been a freelancer now for 22 years, which is a long time, and it's easy to become very entrenched in your own habits. This led me to join a couple of freelance writer discussion groups, which in turn led me to start working with a business coach. I would say this has been one of the best business decisions I've made in more than 20 years of freelancing. I tend to hang out both online and in person in a lot of the same places with a lot of the same people. I really value that kind of continuity, but especially when it comes to marketing training for translators classes, I really needed some new perspectives, and I got that and more from business coaching. The truth is that a lot of us are cheap about investing in our businesses. Even if we are willing to pay for advice, we want someone who is going to talk to us for an hour and fix everything in our business. And it just doesn't work that way for most of us. I accepted from the start that this was going to be a longer term investment, and I decided to spend $1,500 on a 3-month coaching package. And my business coach's name is Teresa, Tresa Edmond, Edmond, and her business is called Boss Responses. I'll put that in the show notes as well. So she charged when I signed up $500 a month with a minimum commitment of 3 months. Now, coaching was something that I wanted to do for myself, regardless of whether I recouped the investment. But I think it is worth mentioning that I recouped the investment in the first month. I had a couple of project offers that I think before working with Teresa, I would not have negotiated successfully, that I did negotiate successfully, that earned me back more than the entire $1,500. I'm now kind of gotten in a groove of spending an hour a day on business development work where I work on my own non-urgent stuff. So this has been a huge transformation for me and kind of merits its own post. Let's wrap up with my annual goal analysis. So this is something I do every year, look at the previous year's goals and then look ahead to the next year. Here are the goals that I set for 2024. Maintain income above $125,000. I was actually right at $125,000, but we'll give this one a yes. Take a subtitling class. No, I decided I didn't want to do this. Simply because with the amount of interpreting that I'm doing, it's so much audio-based work that I didn't want to add more. So I'm not going to put that in the fail column. I'm going to put that in the column of I just decided not to do it. Finish the manuscript of my next book, Getting Started as a Freelance Interpreter. Yes, I did it. It's not published yet, but the publisher has the manuscript. It's fundamentally done. Keep up the same volume of translation work. Yes, I did that, and I actually landed a couple of new translation anchor clients. Continue prioritizing my own well-being and happiness. Also, yes. Aside from the bike accident my husband was in that I mentioned, life this year was really good. I was able to take an impromptu trip to Switzerland with my sister-in-law. I spent part of the summer in British Columbia. I climbed 9 of Colorado's 14,000-foot mountains with my daughter. I meditated regularly, spent New Year's of 2025 in Costa Rica, and did a couple of challenge groups at my yoga studio. Final goal and this is also on the personal side, go to cello camp or start playing in a community orchestra. Yes, I joined a group called Denver Adult Strings Camp, and I played in 2 of their orchestra sessions. Now, looking ahead, here is what I hope to do in 2025. Number 1, earn a higher income. It's really starting to bug me that I've been setting this goal of $140,000 to $150,000 since 2021, and I'm not there yet. Hopefully this year. Work about the same amount I'm working now. I would like to keep about the same volume of translation and interpreting work, and I don't want to fall in the trap of making more money purely by working more. Do some mixing it up with training for translators. So working with a business coach has really made me see that there's a lot more I could be doing with my online courses. I have about 4,500 people on the mailing list, and I'm very consistent with the newsletter, but I tend to do the same things the same way over and over again, and I have lots of new ideas there. Prepare the 20th anniversary edition of How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator. Crazily enough, here it is. I wrote the first edition of How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator in 2006. Did I write it when I was in 2nd grade? No, I'm 53 now. But that's my next book project on tap for early 2026. Get in a routine of spending an hour a day on non-urgent work that is important to me. I think this is really important. I really am enjoying this groove of an hour a day of working on things that aren't for clients and aren't immediately deadline driven, so that those projects in the someday column actually get done. Then on the personal side, continue meditating pretty much daily, exercise on most days, keep cultivating my non-screen hobbies like music and sports, and attend an in-person cello camp. Those things are all in progress, but I just want to put them on there for accountability purposes. So that is it. 2024 in a nutshell. Most of all, I hope that this analysis helps you with your own business goals, and thank you for listening. The podcast is hosted by me, Corinne McKay. My website is trainingfortranslators.com. The intro and outro were created and recorded by Shadow Studio. I host the podcast on Libsyn, and I record it in Audacity using a Shure MB7 Plus microphone. Thanks for listening, and I hope to talk to you again in a future episode.
Thanks for listening to the Training for Translators podcast, helping you do better work, earn more money, and enjoy your job.
To leave a comment, learn more about our upcoming classes, or read blog post versions of our podcast, visit our website at trainingfortranslators.com.
If you enjoy the Training for Translators podcast, please tell your colleagues and friends about it and leave us a review in your favorite podcast app.